A portal sending hundreds of alien-like creatures to a major city to conquer the world, only to encounter a team of superheroes who have never worked together. These individual superheroes must assemble in order to close the portal and save the world. And no, it's not the Avengers. On this episode of Moving Panels, we discuss Justice League War. Welcome to Moving Panels, the podcast where we discuss movies and TV shows based on, inspired by, and adapted from the world of comic books. I'm your host, Laramy Wells, and today I'm being joined by the newest member of our team. Please welcome James Brooks.
Hello, everyone. I'm James Brooks, and I'm really happy to be here. Thanks a lot, Laramy.
Hey, happy to have you. Always happy to grow the Moving Panels family and get other perspectives from other. Hey, we're not ashamed here. Other nerds to talk about this. and James definitely is a nerd. You can't see him, but he is wearing a Child from Mandalorian t-shirt right now. So he's definitely in the right place.
This is the way.
All right, so we're talking about Justice League War. This is to continue and actually finish out our month of March where we talked about all things Justice League. Now, James and I are actually recording this before the release of the Snyder Cut. So last week's episode where we talked about the Snyder Cut, James and I have not seen it. So we will not be able to compare this with the Snyder Cut, but we obviously are going to compare it to the original 2017 release of Justice League. This one, though, Justice League War, was released in 2014 in February. It is actually the first animated movie to feature the New 52. So after the events of Flashpoint, DC Comics kind of rebooted all of their characters into this New 52, which went for a while until they eventually said, okay, guess what? That was a different universe, and now we're blending it all together, and it's always confusing in the world of DC. But this one was directed by Jay Oliva, who previously directed the Dark Knight Returns double feature, as well as the Flashpoint Paradox, kind of previous DC animated universe movies there. This is actually the longest solo movie. Again, Dark Knight Returns was a part 1 and a part 2. This is the longest solo movie. Emerald Knights, some might argue, is longer, but I don't see it that way because it's an anthology. It tells a bunch of different stories. And so, yes, it's longer, but it's not a single story. What's your history with this movie? How long ago did you see it? Did you see it when it was released? Did you not see it until later? Did you not see it until I asked you to be on the podcast?
It's a little mixture of both because I had seen like pictures of it, stills, GIFs all over the place, and I was, I guess, so enamored with the stuff before Dark Knight, part 1, part 2, because my roommate actually showed me it, and from then on I was like, wow, this is really good. And then that's when I found Flashpoint, and then you mentioned it, and then I was like, okay, cool. Same director, and, same kind of like, tone and everything, and I really, really did like it. It was a really, really good film.
It's not bad. Of course, we'll get into that a little bit more. I can't blame the movie, but we'll get into that when we get to the moving panel section. So let's start off talking about our characters. These are our iconic DC characters, and of course, we're going to start off with the person who pretty much kicks it off, and that's Batman. Batman, who is voiced by Jason O'Mara. So they took a different route. It's no longer Kevin Conroy because this is supposed to be a new version of Batman. So we got Jason O'Mara. If you are not familiar with Jason O'Mara, he's done comic book stuff before. He was actually Jeffrey Mace, aka the Patriot, on a season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. He is the voice of Zeus on the Netflix series Blood of Zeus.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, didn't know that, did you?
I did not.
Yeah. And he actually, to replace the iconic Kevin Conroy, I think he did a pretty good job. He gave its own level. He made it sound like Batman, but he wasn't imitating Kevin Conroy's Batman, which I think was very good.
Oh, yeah, same here. I loved Kevin Conroy growing up as a kid, but then when I heard him in this, I really like his Batman. It's a completely different Batman because you hear Kevin Conroy and that's his Batman, but then you hear his version of Batman, and I just, thought it was a good interpretation of what Bruce sounds like.
Yeah, he keeps it very, stern and stoic, but without making him seem dull. which some other voice actors could definitely do with Batman. I've heard it done before, but that's for other episodes. Mm-hmm. And his portrayal of Batman, again, with the script he's working with, he really makes it feel like he is the only one of the superheroes who is taking everything seriously.
Yeah. Absolutely. Like, even from the very beginning, he just, right away, there's someone here, I'm going after them, completely gonna do it, no argument.
Yeah, and
like, he's not even gonna question why it's there either, and yet he's just going straight for it.
And he's telling everybody else, hey, stop acting like an immature toddler, or, think before you go, think before you react, or all of that. I even love at the end when they're all standing there being honored and Shazam calls them the Super Seven. You see all of them react except Batman. Batman just stands there. Doesn't move, doesn't turn, just ignores the whole situation.
He was. At first, I kind of compared him to just be like, that one person in a friend group that's just like got no time for any of this like immature stuff. It's like, okay, I get it. Yeah, whatever. Move on.
Now, this, of course, was supposed to be kind of, again, a reboot. It was when all of the superheroes are new. Some of them probably haven't had their powers long. Of course, they've never met each other until this story. I've heard, it's never said, I don't think it's even said in the comic, I've heard that Batman, I think Jeff Johns said it, Batman's supposed to be like 22 in this storyline, but did you get the impression he's much older than the rest of them?
Yeah, like much older.
Yeah. I don't know if, again, it was part of that, him acting more mature to everything, but he just, the way that Jason O'Mara spoke and the way he acted, he just felt like he was much older than the rest of them.
Yeah, it just, if they were trying to, I understand, but when you, like, he takes off his, like, mask and everything and you look at it, I'm like, okay, now I can kind of see it, but it's just, he makes him sound older, which I think works.
Oh, yeah, no, it works. Definitely works. All right, moving on. Next up would be Wonder Woman, voiced by Michelle Monaghan. If you're unfamiliar with Michelle Monaghan, she was Julia in the most recent Mission Impossible movies. Tom Cruise's kind of like love interest character.
Oh, I never did watch them that much.
Yeah. She also starred opposite of Jake Gyllenhaal in Source Code, and a very similar kind of movie, although without the supernatural kind of aspect. She starred opposite Shia LaBeouf in Eagle Eye.
I vaguely remember Eagle Eye, and I forgot that's an actual movie.
Yeah.
I did.
This wasn't her first take into the comic book movies. She was actually supposed to have a kind of significant role in Keanu Reeves' Constantine, and then all of her scenes were cut. And the only time you see her in the movie, I think you see her when he goes into like the club, when he's going to talk to Midnight. But then you see her at the end when Constantine has put holy water in all of the spouts.
That's it.
Yeah, and she's the woman you see who realizes it and goes, holy water. So she was supposed to be, and that's DC, she was supposed to be in the Constantine live-action movie, but unfortunately, a lot of that was cut. But we'll talk about Constantine in another episode, because I have a lot of thoughts about that movie. But moving on. So in this story, Wonder Woman, I can't help but compare it. Wonder Woman very much is Thor-like in this. If you go with that, especially that first Thor movie.
Oh my gosh, yes. It was, as soon as she gets out of the car, she just like, who are you protesting? And it's like, really?
Yeah, and then, I mean, she's just, you're going to hear me say this a lot with these characters. She's just very almost childlike and immature, like when she's eating the ice cream and she's making this big deal out of it. Of course, I think to the Thor movie, and I think when Chris Hemsworth drinks the beer and he goes, more, and throws it down.
I'll have another.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I like Wonder Woman in the Justice League series. I mean, like, from watching them all the way up to everything in the comics. But it's just, I don't know. I didn't sound like to say I hated her character. It just seemed, like you said, very childish. It's like she's being Diana for the very first time.
And she's just waving her sword around. Like, it, like, she wouldn't just accidentally slice somebody. Doesn't even treat it like it's a weapon. You would think someone who is supposed to be this warrior would respect a weapon.
Yeah, definitely.
And wouldn't just be waving it around the way she does. So, I mean, I got worried when the little girl is offering her the ice cream.
Oh, yeah. About to get a banana split. No joke.
What did you think about the costume? Because they did change her costume from the way it looks in the comics. So what did you think with giving her kind of like the turtleneck? And
I kind of like it. I mean, I like the whole aspect of it. Just, makes her feel, I don't know, like they're trying to not sex her up in a way,
Oh, we're going to talk about that later.
Yeah, I know what you mean with that later, but it's just, it was a new look on Wonder Woman for me, and I was like, okay, like a turtleneck, I don't hate it, but at the same time, I'm just like, I don't see the significance in it as a warrior, as an Amazon.
Yeah, I get it. They're trying to kind of put her on more of an equal ground with the male heroes. So I didn't have a problem with it either. I wish her hair had been down. I found it really odd that she was able to maintain a ponytail the entire time.
Right?
I mean, she's battling and getting hit and all that by Darkseid, but yet ponytail stays.
Yeah, no strand of hair even comes down like, in a big fight. Nope, stays nice and...
All right, moving on. You know what? He doesn't have a really big part for being such a big character, but let's talk about the Flash. The Flash, Barry Allen, voiced by Christopher Gorham, who many people might know. I immediately recognize him as Bobby from Two Broke Girls. I was a big fan of that show. But most people may actually know him as Augie from the USA show Covert Affairs. And he also played Henry on Ugly Betty, which my wife is a fan of.
Oh, wow.
But he doesn't do much in this, to be honest.
No, not really. And it's kind of a shame, too. I meant, he's just kind of there in bits and pieces, and, I get it. And then, all of a sudden, they just kind of throw, oh, ha, 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 everyone's going to make fun of Barry as, be fast as give you all the food orders. And I'm just kind of really? This is what we're going to treat the Flash like, is just,
Well, and they set up at the beginning when Dr. Silas Stone is talking to the Flash, although it's actually, Barry Allen. And I love that when he is the Flash, or even when he's talking as the Flash, he talks extremely fast. I love that aspect of it. But they even have the line where Dr. Stone says, I feel like I'm talking to another scientist. And Flash just kind of blows that off. And I'm just going, oh, yeah, but you are, and yet they do nothing with that in this story.
They don't. It's just they just kind of drop it there, and then they never touch it again.
Yeah, so I didn't really get the Flash. I'm a huge Flash fan, but it's kind of a wasted character. But let's move on there. We're going to talk about the guy who was the substitute in this story. He replaced Aquaman from the original comic. And that is, I will always to this day call him Captain Marvel, but it is Shazam. And and here's why I have a problem with him being called Shazam. It's because he says Shazam to turn into the superhero. And so in the movie, when he shows up, he introduces himself and he says, I'm Shazam. And I'm just sitting there going, shouldn't that have just turned him back into Billy?
Yeah, I was expecting that too. He just says it and I'm like, no lightning bolt? Nothing? All right.
I've never liked that they changed his name.
What's that?
Yeah, I've never liked that they've changed his name because, again, how can he say his name when his name is what turns him into Captain Marvel and back into Billy Batson? I get the whole legality issue with Marvel, and of course we've got Captain Marvel in the MCU. I get it, but I mean, come up with something else. Or
there were just so many Miss Marvels, I guess.
Yeah, give him another battle cry or something to turn himself in. I don't know what to say. But in this movie, Shazam is voiced by the legendary Sean Astin. I mean, if you don't recognize the name Sean Astin, I mean, come on. Goonies, Rudy, I mean, Samwise from The Lord of the Rings. Come on.
Yes.
Stranger Things. I mean,
it caught me off guard too when I was like, wait a minute, is that who I think it is? And I was just like, oh my god, that's amazing that he's the voice of him. It's so cool.
Yeah. It is, but again, going back to the character, Aquaman is in the story in the comic. And so they replaced Aquaman with Shazam, and I just went, why? Like, why? The only thing I could think of is he's there to make that connection with Cyborg, which he does. But other than that, I was like, I don't get why. Why Shazam? Like, why not bring in Martian Manhunter? Why not bring in, I don't know. I just think when you've got Superman and it's a team, you don't need Shazam in that team.
Yeah, I can see it because to me, during the whole thing, he did feel really, really out of place. And I hadn't read the comic like before watching the movie and everything, or at least like trying to get an understanding. So throughout the whole entire film, I was like, for some reason, Shazam just feels really out of place in this.
No, again, that's because because he's not from the original
I like
story.
his character there, but at the same time, I'm just like, he just feels like he's just kind of forced in there.
Here's my problem with the character. So Billy Batson is given the powers of Shazam because he is kind of making that Thor reference again. He's worthy of those powers. Mm-hmm. You know, the wizard gives him the powers because he's worthy of those powers. And in this movie, he's a brat. Like,
right?
He's, stealing, he's sneaking into the football game, he's stealing the jersey, and I was like, that goes completely against who Billy Batson and Shazam is supposed to be.
Yeah, and he kind of pushes, like, his friends away, too, and I was just like, wow, all right, that seems very un-Shazam-like of you to do that. You're supposed to be, this very warm-hearted person. I'm not saying you need to be happy-go-lucky, but I just, you felt very just like, cut off from everybody else.
All right, so let's move into the character that's kind of the central focus of this new iteration of the Justice League, and that's Cyborg, voiced by Shamar Moore from Criminal Minds and the SWAT television show. Mm-hmm. Big actor there. And of course, this is a new origin, a new iteration of Cyborg from the Teen Titans Cyborg we've had since the 80s. They tie him in to Darkseid, to Apocalypse, by making him, the mechanical part of him is from apocalyptic tech. They bring all that in. I do think that that his story's the best part of this movie, because we get his origin, we get his purpose. Like, we know why he's doing what he's doing, we know what's driving him to do what he's doing, we get his motivation as to what he's wanting to do. I just think he's the best represented character in this entire story.
Oh, I have to agree 100%. From like the moment he came on and just the whole process of him becoming Cyborg, I was just invested. I wanted to see it happen. I loved his whole frustration with his dad. I really, really, really felt that with Cyborg, because I know it's mentioned in the comics, like how his dad is, I'm not going to say like estranged, but he feels estranged to him. And then now he loses his son, and then you see the distraught, and then Cyborg comes out, and I love the design. I love it so much. I love the fighting of it, and I just really like how he became just so a complete night and day character in in a span of few hours.
Yeah, and I like that they had his suit, whatever you want to call it, the mechanical part of him, change throughout the movie. Because in the comic, when he comes up, he's just Cyborg. Like, he looks exactly like what he's going to always look like. So I like that this one, he was still bulky when he was first starting. And then as the story went along, you see him kind of form a little bit more until finally at the end he does have that Cyborg look. I just think it was the best arc of all of the characters.
Yeah, and I thought his powers were really cool too, just how you get to see what's going on inside him with the whole parademon technology, fusing with him.
Yeah,
I really did like that part.
I wanted him to say booyah, though. He didn't say booyah.
Right. I wanted him to say it as soon as he, wiped out the whole area of the parademons in the laboratory.
I mean, Ray Fisher says it in the Justice League movie. Shamar Moore could have said it. Come on.
Yes, he could have.
All right, let's talk about the big blue Superman himself. I got to be honest. I love Alan Tudyk. I think Alan Tudyk is a great actor, especially a voice actor. He should not have been the voice of Superman.
Yeah, for me, the Superman, he felt off. Just like the way he was delivering his stuff too felt really, really off.
Yeah.
I don't know what was going on. I don't know if someone just was like, okay, give us this take, and then you're not going to give that take again? No? All right.
Yeah, and for those of you not familiar with Alan Tudyk, and honestly, if you're listening to this podcast, you have to know who Alan Tudyk is. He was Wash in Firefly, the Serenity movie. He's the Harley Quinn animated series that's on HBO Max. He's the voice of the Joker and Clayface.
Yes.
He was Mr. Nobody, the big villain in season 1 of Doom Patrol.
Oh, yes, he was so good.
He's done voice work in Zootopia, Star Wars Rogue One, Frozen. He was Weaselton.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. He was the voice of King Candy in Wreck-It Ralph.
Oh, that's right, he was. Okay.
Yeah. So, again, love Alan Tudyk. Not just as a voice actor. I think even stuff he's performed in. Dale and Tucker versus Evil is one of my favorite.
Oh,
yeah,
it is so good.
Yeah, I knew you would like that. Me bringing that one up. So I love Alan Tudyk, but he is not Superman.
I'm afraid not. I mean, like you said, he's got a great background and everything, but I just don't know what it is. When he tried to do Superman, it didn't feel like Superman. It just felt like Alan Tudyk just reading his lines, because that's all I was really getting every time he came on.
Well, and there was also something, and again, goes into the source material, but this Superman is just so self-centered. Yep. And just like we talked about with some of the other characters, like talking about Shazam and Billy Batson and how it went against character, it's the same thing here. I mean, he's supposed to be, they call him the ultimate Boy Scout in the comics. He's supposed to be, him and Batman are supposed to be polar opposites of each other. And so it was weird that Batman's the one that says, we need to just talk to him. That should have been something Superman came up with. So I don't know.
It was really strange, that whole that whole scene with those two. I was like, okay, there's no way he's like this oblivious to what's happening. I mean, at some point he would at least not throw up arms, but lay down for a second, and be like, okay, let's stop fighting, let's talk. Hold on, what are you doing? But no, it was just go and fight.
And I didn't get it. And also, I know this was a big deal of Superman back in the 90s, late 80s and early 90s, which is what ultimately led to, the death of Superman. This Superman seems way too powerful. And I do think Superman should have a kind of limit, or I don't know. I'm torn about that one, because one of my favorite scenes out of the Justice League animated series is when he's fighting Darkseid, and he talks about living in a cardboard world where he has to be so careful, and that up against Darkseid he can finally let loose. But I had a problem with a lot of the attacks from the other superheroes when they are fighting at the beginning, just don't phase him.
Yeah, they really don't.
And so it kind of diminishes the other characters.
Mm-hmm. He just was way too strong. His personality just didn't feel like Superman.
No, definitely
really
did not.
Didn't.
And we'll talk about this a little bit more, but I did not like the way he just kind of swooned over Wonder Woman.
It was literally as soon as he saw her, oh, hello. That's all it was.
You're strong. And again, I got a whole thing about that when we get into the next segment.
Oh, Lord.
But let's move on to a character that I am on the fence, which is why I saved him for last. And that's Green Lantern. Green Lantern, voiced by Justin Kirk. I know him best as Andy from Weeds. I also liked him. He had a short-lived series on Fox called APB, where he played this rich guy who bought the police force and then used his high-tech technology on the police force.
I totally forgot that was a thing.
Yeah, I was a fan of that show, but it only lasted, I don't know if it lasted a full season. I think it only lasted half a season.
I totally forgot that was the actual thing. That's so funny.
And I think he was good for the portrayal of the kind of sarcastic, egotistical Green Lantern. I absolutely loved the banter between him and Batman at the beginning, which again, it's out of the comic when Batman takes his ring and he's like, I bet you won't do that again. And Batman's like, unless I want to.
Yeah, this is just me throughout my whole DC, as a kid. I don't think Green Lantern was my favorite, but I didn't hate him. If he was in something, I'd watch him. But with this, I was going into it and I was thinking, oh boy, he's already bantering with Batman. And I'm like, please tell me he's not going to be like this overbearing character. But then it surprised me and I was like, okay, Bruce has got some stuff up his sleeve. He's bouncing off. I'm starting to like this Lantern now.
Yeah,
I really am. And I just liked how he remembered his name. And he's like, how do you know my name?
Yeah. His immaturity worked for the character. I think that Justin Kirk made that work for Green Lantern.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And as bad as it was, I couldn't help but laugh every time I went back and I watched it. That scene, he runs to Darkseid and he just grabs him and just tosses. Every time I've laughed when that happened. Oh, it was so funny.
But here's my one negative. He does not act like someone who has had military training.
No, none at all. He just is like, oh, look at me. I've got a ring. All right. So what's your plan? Charge in. Okay, that doesn't work.
Yeah, because that's one of the things about especially Hal Jordan's Green Lantern, is that he he's supposed to be a leader, which I know they kind of try to play with towards the end of the story, but for someone who is supposed to have whatever limited military training he had, I know he's more of a test pilot than he is an actual member of the Air Force, but yeah, I was like, you should have a little bit more tactical of a mindset than just, again, I got this, like so many of the characters do.
Good Lord, yeah.
All right, and finally, we've got our big bad, Darkseid, voiced by voice actor Steve Blum. Not his first run in comics. He was actually the voice of Kang the Conqueror on the Disney Avengers animated series. He's done several video games, and he would actually come back in this series once the New 52 storyline kind of hit. He would come back in future DC animated movies as the voice of Lex Luthor.
Oh, that's so cool. I didn't know about that.
Yeah, but in this, Darkseid is, and again, source material, which we're going to get into in a minute. He's a flat character. He arrives, he looks intimidating, he slaps them around a little bit, but then he just gets beaten up, and I mean, it was a waste of what is essentially DC's biggest villain.
Yeah, that's how I felt too. When I was thinking about it, I was more intimidated by the parademons than I was him. He just kind of shows up and just starts destroying stuff, but I'm like, okay, that's it. He's really got nothing else going for him except just that one little, direction he's heading in, destruction, and then, the taking of people, make more parademons. And I'm like, well, that's kind of a boring.
Yeah, I needed him to talk more. I needed him to boast about how, kind of like he did when he started off, when he says, I am death, I am Darkseid. I wanted more of that, where he's beating them up and he's just maybe calling them worthless.
You are weak compared to me,
Yeah, stuff like that. That's where Darkseid needs to be. And so I just, this was just such a bad representation of that character.
Yeah, I meant... At first, I was hoping more, but then as soon as he, wouldn't talk for a while, I was like, okay, I think I know what's about to happen. He's not going to talk at all. He's just going to get beat up a lot, and then they're going to somehow send him back to his dimension. And I was like, yep, was what happened. And I was a little disappointed with that part of the story. Just a little bit.
All right, so let's move into the moving panels. This, of course, was almost shot for shot based off of the kickoff to the New 52 from the Justice League Origin storyline. Justice League number 1, which, again, was November 2011. It was the kickoff to the New 52, written by Jeff Johns. But it's not his best work. I am a fan of Jeff Johns as a writer. This was not his best work. It's a 6-part series, which you can honestly sit and read in probably about 15 minutes. It is.
Really?
Yeah. I mean.
Oh, that's a little disappointing.
Well, it's because there's just so much action in it. There's not any story. There's not any exposition. It's just fight scene, fight scene, fight scene, fight scene. Just fills up everything, which this movie clearly showed. Of course, I'm exaggerating a little bit. It'd probably take a little bit more than 15 minutes, but I honestly think you could read this in less time than it took to watch the movie. I really do.
I might have to actually give that a read, because I skimmed over a little bit, but I actually want to see that 6-part series and really, really dissect it like you have, because I like it when they do that, when they make the story better than what it was in the comics. But if I was trying to figure out where they got most of the source material, if they changed so much, or if they changed not much at all compared to what you've read.
Well, honestly, all the stuff with Shazam, with Billy Batson, that was all added in. The best part of the movie, the Air Force One battle, that's not from the comic. That was all added in.
Okay.
But other than that, I mean, like I said, it's almost shot for shot. It's a little out of order from the comic, but I mean, it's almost shot for shot, to be honest. But again, the source material wasn't great. The movie did what it could with what it had, but the source material was not great. Johns would do much better as the storylines would improve. In fact, once he hit the Thrones of Atlantis storyline, which is in the comics is not the next storyline. It was the sequel to this movie, was the Thrones of Atlantis. You do see they have the mid-credit scene where you see Ocean Master, but the Thrones of Atlantis is a much better storyline. Again, he got better, but to kick off the New 52, it was a bad start, and I think it put a bad taste in a bunch of people's mouth when it came to the New 52, and New 52 was just, altogether, in my opinion, was just underwhelming. But, like I said, they adapted the story well. The fact that they're young, new-ish superheroes, they are all independent, they don't really want to work with one another, they're just showing off. I mean, that's exactly what Johns gets across in the comic. So that was done really well. But like I said, it's all action. There's no characterization. We know nothing about Superman other than he is this powerful superhero. That's all we know. Even when Batman calls him Clark, if you are new to this story, which is what it was supposed to be, this was a brand new introduce people to these characters. That's what the New 52 was. This was issue number 1. This was reboot the DC universe. Let's start all over. But yet, this was a reboot of the DC universe. It was a way to introduce these characters to start all over. And yet, they went into it. Johns went into this story, or actually, because that whole Clark thing's not in the comic. That was added for the movie, where he stops him by calling him Clark. That was not in the comic.
Oh, interesting.
But you're still going into this going, we're doing this to an audience that we're expecting already know these characters. Whereas we get nothing. We don't know why the Flash is the Flash. We don't know what Green Lantern is talking about when he says that he's patrolling the entire universe. We don't know why a kid can say Shazam and turn into this, big, huge superhero. We don't know why Wonder Woman is being led around by Steve Trevor, or who Steve Trevor is, and why she's working with the U.S. government. I'm just like, come on. If you're introducing these characters, we need to get at least something, some exposition, some dialogue, a flashback or something to bring these characters in and show us who these characters are, which is why I go back to saying Cyborg has the best story arc, because we get all of that from him.
Oh, definitely. And that's why, like I said, I agree with you. Cyborg was like the best fleshed out in the amount of time that he was Cyborg. Everybody else just kind of shows up to show up, and no explanation. Why is she going to see the president? We don't know. Mm-hmm. Why is, Flash, running around doing stuff? We don't know. And that was like a killer for me a little bit, because I was expecting everyone to have maybe a quick rundown of who they are, just for those who might not know this.
Like I said, even if you just have a quick explanation, I know that Batman gives a little one when he talks about when he was 10 years old, his, parents were murdered, and he gives that little story. Mm-hmm. But again, to have Batman call Superman Clark, but yet we're going, who's Clark? And, it's almost like the line in the movie, which I think is also in the comic, when Batman reveals himself to Green Lantern. They do it differently in the movie because it's when the Clark moment happens. But in the comic, when he reveals himself to Green Lantern and he says he's Bruce Wayne, Green Lantern goes, who's Bruce Wayne?
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, that perfectly explains the audience that is supposed to be your focus in this story. It's supposed to be a brand new audience who do not know these characters.
Yeah, and I felt like that's something they probably should have done better with the film.
Definitely.
I know they wanted to show action, but it's just, I don't know. When you do nothing but action like they were trying to portray in the comics, you kind of lose a lot for the characters, just a little bit, because it really doesn't make them look like superheroes, just kind of like these random people that just showed up.
But what also doesn't make them look like superheroes is the fact that they act like arrogant, annoying teenagers who are just trying to show off to each other. Mm-hmm. I mean, the only one that really should have done that was Shazam, which he does do when he says to Wonder Woman, so is that your boyfriend? She says no, and he's like, watch this, it takes off. He's really the only one that should have acted that way, because he is a teenager
and he doesn't understand, I guess, the threat that's going on. It's just almost like a game to him. But then again, he's the child, but everyone else is adults. And again, with Diana being like Thor, it's like, oh, look at me, I'm being an Amazon for the very first time. It just really, I don't know, not a good introduction for all of them.
Here's going into them being superheroes. Here's something I want to ask you. So when Cyborg connects to the mother box and all that, he finds out that parademons are people from the worlds that Darkseid conquers, which in this case would be Earth, that they are people that are kidnapped and transformed into the parademons. Mm-hmm. Now, in this movie, again, this is not from the comic. In this movie, you have Superman start to go through that process. And then he fights Batman, again, not in the comic, but he fights Batman. And I got two problems here. One is then when Superman comes back, he's got this chest plate on with no explanation as to what it's supposed to be.
Yep, I've noticed that too. I was like, so did Bruce throw that on him, or is that just stuck to him forever?
Well, no, he immediately takes it off. But my thought was maybe that was something that Bruce found that helped reverse the transformation. And so that's why he had it on, because it reversed the transformation.
Yeah, it must have been at that point, because there's no explanation, like you said. It's on him.
Yeah, because you can't say that it was what allowed him to travel through the boom tube, because then Batman comes back through the boom tube with no chest plate on. Mm-hmm. Another part that needs explaining. But with that being said, with the fact that we know that the transformation process can at least be reversed, does that mean the Justice League murdered all of these people?
I started to think about that too, because as they're just like blowing up all these parademons, I'm just like, well, you could change Superman back. Can you not change the others back? Mm-hmm. Or are you just going to murder them all?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that gets more morbid when you think about the fact that Shazam's like a 12-year-old.
Yeah. And he's just committed murder for the first time ever. And I think it contradicts it as well, but that's, I guess, thinking about it deep.
All right. I've hinted at this. I'm ready to talk about this. Let's talk about the way they treat Wonder Woman. And this is from the comic. It's from the source material, but it's so much creepier to see when it's animated out. I mean, first off, when she's introduced, the guy on top of the car literally says the phrase, "She's dressed like a whore."
Yeah, that. I mean, I'm not a prude or anything, but it comes out of nowhere.
Yeah, and that part was not in the comic. To my knowledge, that part was not in the comic. And then the way the other male characters, the male superheroes speak to him. I mean, when she shows up and Flash and Green Lantern see her for the first time, Green Lantern says dibs.
Yeah, it's...
that does not sit right.
It really isn't, because like I said, all of a sudden here comes Wonder Woman. It's like, oh, we're seeing this woman for the first time that has superpowers like the rest of us. Yeah, definitely. Let's go for it.
Yeah, and then Shazam does something, and I forgot who he says it to, but he says, "She digs me." I'm like, dude, you're 12.
Yeah, it's so uncomfortable. It really is. Like, Cyborg was the young one. I'm like, thank you. And Bruce, I'm like, thank you, too, for just, like, focusing on the task at hand.
Yeah. Because, again, even Superman, I already said this earlier, when Superman first meets her, "You're strong." And I'm like, so bad. So bad.
Superman in a bar comes up to you, "You're strong."
So bad. And of course, the New 52 led to them having a relationship, which again goes back to that whole thing at the end when you see the two of them kind of, staring at each other, and you see Steve Trevor in the background, and he just goes, and walks away. I'm like,
right? Why
should we care? Because they have not built that Steve and Diana are supposed to have a connection. Why do we care? We do not care about that.
Yeah, it felt really forced too. I'm just like, okay, you're really wanting everybody to, ship both Wonder Woman and Superman like right off the bat, and I don't understand why. I really don't.
Yeah,
it does nothing for the plot. It does nothing for the characters. It's just there.
That's definitely what a lot of this movie is. It's just there. Let's talk about the movie itself. Disconnect from the comics and all. Let's just talk about the movie itself. The animation. I admit that I like the kind of anime style of the animation. Really bringing in the same kind of texture and color tone that you would see out of a Japanese anime on the same level. So I kind of like that. So I think it was good to look at. I think it really looked like a comic come to life. It wasn't too cartoonish, and I like that. What'd you think of the animation style?
I really liked it too. What I was worried about when I saw the time period it was in, I was like 2014. I'm about to say, oh, we're gonna have like some really weird CGI, aren't we? Like some like fat looking polygon just come floating out of the air, or just something that didn't look natural. But then I was happy with that, because like even when the dimensions opened up, it looked good. It didn't look like you were trying to put a big budget on it to make it look like it was going to pop out.
Yeah, they've definitely had some... I can't think of one off the top of my head, but they've definitely had some movies, animated movies, where things like a portal, like the boom tubes, are CGI. They're a computer element in an otherwise drawn, animated... I know it's not hand-drawn. I don't need anybody to tell me it's... I know the way they do animation now is all computer. But to actually have something that looks like it's made from a computer, I am glad they didn't do any of that.
I still think, like I said, I'll go back to it again. My favorite part of the animation was the parademons. I loved how they looked. I love the animation animation style of them. I love just they were great. Even the transformation of the parademons, so horrible to watch, but at the same time, it was great.
I got to go back to something that didn't make sense. Why was that parademon at the beginning wearing a cloak? Just so we would, for a second, think it was Batman? There's no explanation to anything in the story.
There really wasn't for that. I thought that was really weird, but at the same time, I'm like, was some weird person Batman's chasing? And then all of a sudden, I see the mouth. I'm like, oh, nope, it's parademon.
All right, so what did you think? Like, was there anything as far as just... I know you've done some movie reviews before on a YouTube channel. So give me the James Brooks review of this movie.
All right. Now, I will just say this. I say this a lot in some of my movie reviews, and some people have taken offense to it. I say, please don't. I say it's popcorn entertainment. It's not something that's going to give you... You're not going to get explanations from movies. It's just it's something that you turn on.
There are no
to have fun
explanations
with.
in this movie.
There is none. It's just a fun Justice League movie. That's where I liked it. It was a lot of fun to watch. I love the action scenes and everything else, but for me, what really kind of dampened it down after, some of the fights would go down, I'm like, it just dawned on me. Nobody has an explanation about anything right now. You're all just fighting. That's it. But it's a fun movie to watch. I would definitely put it on a rewatch value. I'm really happy that I went back and started it again and then continued on to the sequel, which we won't get into now. But I really did like it. I liked the whole thing. Aquaman's going to be in the next one. It's just fun. My only problem is there was a couple of funny edits in the film, and the one that stuck out to me the most was when they say, oh, where'd Shazam go? Oh, he took off. But if you go and look at the scene where they're catching all the people that are coming out, you see that Shazam is in the same spot where Superman is. And you see one shot, it's Superman, but then it switches and it shows Shazam. And
wow. I was like,
did nobody, look at this and be like, oh, wait, he's right there.
Wow, I'll have to check that out. I mean, usually I can catch things like that, but I honestly, by that point in the movie, I think my eyes are just tired from all of the quick, fast action and all that's happening. So that's pretty cool. I'll have to go back and check that. So any other thoughts about the movie?
None off the top of my head. Just like I said, it's a fun movie. That's really all it is. It's nothing, no meaning to life type thing. It's just have fun with it.
Yeah. All right. And that, of course, brings us into our final decision. And on moving panels, I'll go through it since James is new. We call it bag it, stack it, or trade it. Same way you would treat a comic book. So I'm going to ask you, James, would you bag it, which means you'd seal it up, with board and bag. You'd put it in your box because you cherish it. It's a special thing. You want it to always be in pristine condition. You really love it. You want to share it with other people when they come to look. Or do you stack it, which means it was okay. I liked it. I'll just throw it over here and maybe I'll pick it up from time to time and give it a look. But that's about it. Or would you trade it? Would you go, you know what? I'd rather have something else. So go ahead and pick, James. Do you bag it, stack it, or trade it?
I'm going to have to say I would stack it. Keep it, but at the same time, every now and then, pull it out just to watch it.
Yeah, and I think you gave a good explanation for that in your little mini review there. I'm with you there. I say stack it. The movie does do better with the comic. It tries to improve on the weak story that's in the comic, but it really suffers from that source material. And I hate to say that because I am a huge Jeff Johns fan, but this was just not a good story. Superman, I'm a big Superman fan, but this is not a good version of Superman. And again, it's just a little too much action. I want more explanation. I wanted more context. I wanted to be able to walk out of I wanted this to be a movie that you could say, hey, you're not familiar with these characters? Watch this. You'll be introduced to all 7 of these guys. Mm-hmm. But you're not. And so, definitely falls flat for me.
Yeah, I'm afraid I'm with you on that. I like it. I like the whole... You want to bring these characters in. I understand that. You want to respect the source material, and I get that. But at the same time, if the source material's there and you don't have much to work with, you kind of have to get a little more creative and add to it because we can't really put this together. Or if you're new, you really can't just, decipher, oh, this is so-and-so. I didn't know that,
Yeah, but we got no, other than Cyborg. Cyborg's got the best arc. We got no information about these other characters in this, what is supposed to be the birth of the Justice League, the introduction of these characters, at least to the new audience at that time. So, it is what it is.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thanks, James.
No problem.
Hope to have you back. We might do Thrones of Atlantis down the road. But thank you all for listening. I was about to say watching. Thank you all for listening. Definitely not ever doing this as a video. But thank you all for listening. Rate, review, and subscribe to us on any of your following podcast apps. We're on iTunes. We're on Spotify. Just find us. We really could use the support. And please, please, please contact us on social media. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. We're on Instagram. I'm on TikTok. And all of those, it's under @MovingPanels. But again, thank you, James. Thank you for joining us and being our newest member of the Moving Panel family.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
All right. For Moving Panels, I'm Laramy Wells, and I'll see you on the other side of the page. Can you hear that?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, I just got little spikes.